An initiative designed to reward teachers for moving to struggling schools is drawing the ire of some educators. The Martinez administration wants to give teachers who move from schools ranked A or B, and again, we have this ranking system we have here, move those teachers to those ranked D or F, and a $5,000 pay boost will come. But many teachers question the merits of the plan and whether these grades reflect a teacher's effectiveness. Rob, I want to ask you this first. You wrote about this, actually. It's not strictly a partisan issue. The program passed the legislature. President Barack Obama has weighed in. It's going on around the country in different ways. The nature of the pushback, your sense of it, why is this not popular among some in the teaching community? What's the problem?
Because for a lot of them, they don't want educational reform. That's, for a lot of them, that's a big reason why.
Interesting. Now, are you talking from the professional educators, meaning
the
people,
teachers' unions came out,
people, or rank and file educators?
I would say the teachers' union specifically. And in Santa Fe, none of the, first of all, it should be pointed out that these transfers, if someone wants to transfer, it's purely voluntary.
Right.
No one is forced to do it.
Right.
And also, it's. You would think that just as you mentioned, the Obama administration has offered something similar to this, because you've got the problem is you're trying to help struggling schools, and the thinking is, well, look, we can make an incentive for some of these teachers that are in schools that are doing great.
Let me stop you right there.
Bring them there.
I like that word, use that word incentive. And Jerry Klossing from AP, again, opinions being what they are, depends. 5,000 is a lot of money for some people, and it's an insult for some others.
I would think a true incentive would have to be putting money into where you could actually pay those teachers at those schools more money, permanent, long term, a real incentive to go there. A $5,000 one-time incentive, I don't think.
Well, that's the feedback I'm getting as well. And here's another thing to throw at you as well. I hear from my ex-wife's a school teacher. I've been around a lot of school teachers. What happens to the attitude of those teachers who have been slogging away in that D or F school? This superstar waltzes in the door with $5,000 extra in their pocket than they have just by being there. Are you really telling me that's going to be a cohesive team?
And who's to say it's really a superstar? They just happen to come from a school that has more funding, has a better grade. I don't see that there's really anything other than the school grade.
That's right. Would you agree with that? That there's a whole lot of things that make a teacher effective or not, or make a school get an A or an F.
And I think that's the main flaw with this entire issue, is that it presumes that if you are a teacher who's working at a school that's graded A or B or whatever the plan is, that you're a great teacher without any kind of connection to your actual evaluation, to your actual method, to what your results have been individualized. It's just, if you're from this school, you can move to this other school. It's incredibly demoralizing also for people who have been spending a lot of time, maybe wonderful teachers, at these poorly overall performing schools. That's a real problem, and I think it's going to cause a lot of problems down the road. I also agree that it's not a long-term fix. It's a one-time $5,000.
Yeah.
If I could just jump in here.
Absolutely.
I mean, is that you make a very good point. Your points are well taken, Laura. However, there's very little teacher evaluation here in New Mexico, and when the public education department tries to put in a teacher evaluation program, they're met with resistance. So
mainly a lawsuit.
If we're trying to find out whether a teacher is an effective teacher, a big reason to be, or big way to determine whether they're doing a good job, is have a good evaluation system.
But to tie these standardized tests to the evaluations, when the standardized tests may not really, you're testing students who are not starting out on the same foot here. So it's difficult then. Again, you're not determining whether the teachers at these poor schools, they may well be better teachers, but their students aren't coming into it with the same basic skills.
And they also maybe in those poorer schools have actually made as a percentage more advances, Tom, than actually that A or B school who are maintaining a student's good habits. Tom, there's all kinds of issues. Home life.
Absolutely.
A stable place to do homework, all that kind of stuff that goes into a school's overall performance.
The teacher is one aspect, one part of that equation. The other part is, what's the home life like?
That's right.
What's the economic situation like? What are the resources that are going into the school to help the teachers to really connect with students? And that's why I think would be smart to do is, instead of offering, saying that, okay, some teachers are better than others, which sometimes I believe is the case, but you don't really know that unless you evaluate. Okay, let's give instead of a $5,000 incentive, let's free up $5,000 or $10,000 for a school to try a new approach to reach certain areas of students that need to achieve. I think a good culture of test taking creates students who are good test takers. But as we talked about previously, is that we don't need a bunch of good test takers. We need good workers. Right. We need folks who are going to contribute to the community, not be really good at taking a standardized test.
Right.
But just for the sake of argument, and I guess I'm in a contrarian mood today, but if we've got doctors, we've got a doctor shortage in New Mexico.
Right.
We have incentives to bring doctors, to places like Deming, where you grew up. What's wrong with offering doctors? If we give doctors incentives to say we'll knock off a portion of your medical school expenses, why are we just sometimes automatically saying, reflexively saying, well, to evaluate teachers, you're separating them between good or bad. Well, we do that when we incentivize doctors, don't we?
That's a fair enough point. Let me throw a counter at you. It seems to me these people are getting rewarded for something that happened in the past that may or may not have been in their control, may not have been from their particular skill set. What happens if they make no difference at that new school? Do they give the $5,000 back? What happens if they fail? I don't understand. It's free money. It literally is free money. You don't have to do anything to keep the money, so to speak. Is there another $5,000 coming down the road if in fact you do succeed with this failed school? It just doesn't seem terribly thought out, Laura. I just want to get your sense of that.
What's to keep them after 2 years from moving back to another school?
That's right.
And sort of gaming the system that way. I mean, it's not really, I think, bringing the type of value that it appears to be. I mean, that those who have proposed it are suggesting that it's going to bring, because there's just no long-term check and balance to make sure that you're actually bringing that value.
Let's go back to Rob's point. Let's assume there is some value with bringing teachers from other places with new ideas, new sensibilities, new standards, whatever the case may be. And it's culturally appropriate, it's locally sensitive, things just sort of work. In your guys' view, what would be a better way to go, starting with Rob Nicoleski, what would be a better way to go to move teachers around? Is it about money? Because as I read it, in teachers, it's really not about money for teachers.
Well,
they're in it for a vastly different reason.
I remember back when I was in grad school, and there are lots of things that motivate people.
Right.
Money is just one of them.
Right.
And that's regardless of whether you're a teacher or whatever profession you're in. I think you have to have, I hate to use this term because it sounds so PBS-ish, but we need to have an integrated system, where you have lots of different components.
Yes.
And I think that's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
That's what, you don't want to pick just one thing and say, okay, we're going to incentivize people with money or do this.
Right.
It has to be part of an integrated whole.
Right. And Jerry, this gets to my point about, it seems to me we have this hyperventilating look at teachers. Like the teacher is the be-all, end-all. And as we're all agreeing here, it's an ecosystem that makes a kid or a school either fail or not.
Right.
Have we gotten too hysterical about individual teachers and how they perform or not in the classroom and missing the bigger picture?
It's the education is a baffling topic this way, and that's why we still have so many problems. It's really hard to know, and whether it's the grading, have we gotten too hypersensitive about grading schools, grading teachers? There was a story in the Washington Post this week. One of the reporters followed the Secretary Duncan down to Columbus. It was talking about the children that come over from Mexico that are being taught in the Deming schools. Some of them have never even held a pencil. There's such the broad spectrum of challenges that these teachers face from different schools to different schools.
Because it seems to me, I hear what you're saying, it seems to me, I'm going to swing back to the side of the table and wrap this segment up, Laura, is that teachers, this idea does not sound like teachers were at the table, that they were listened to. I can't imagine a cohort of teachers agreeing to this if they were part of the original. Does your gut say the same thing to you? Something doesn't seem quite right here.
I'm not sure that teachers have been at the table for a lot of these kinds of ideas. I mean, I think back to the $60,000 reader idea and I don't even know where things stand with that. But you compare that to the average salaries that teachers are making, plus $5,000 if you move to one of these areas. I mean, there's something wrong there if we're talking about
a lot of these folks, if I can, that are making these decisions are former teachers. I mean, so I don't think it's accurate to say that teachers don't have have a place at the table. Teachers are at the table.
But are they not meeting with legislators to address that problem this week, if I'm not mistaken? A group of teachers.
I'll defer to you. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's just not being heard is the gripe that you hear a lot.
you know what? It's all about creating relevance.
Okay.
I mean, teachers, because of their nature, have a relevant place in our society. They have a relevant place in education. You know, how are they transitioning that to get to make a point at the table, so to speak? You know, all I see right now are two sides that are on different ends of the table. It's like the legislature.
Right.
Okay, a real contentious bill. Nobody's willing to budge, but nobody's really showing a reason why they're really relevant. They're just using their power to try and influence, you know, their particular point of view. And it's just the kids are falling through the cracks.
Interesting. And on that point, it's interesting. Let's see how this plays out because money does talk, but it just talks to a few. So we'll just see how that goes. In a moment, we're back with two experts to talk about changing our relationship with water to protect our river basins.